This dramatic story revolves around Mick Philpott, who became a notorious figure in Great Britain. His life journey drew public attention not only because he had become a father to 17 children by the age of 50 but also due to his regular appearances on television programs. His story caused a genuine sensation in 2012 when it spread beyond the British Isles. Before I dive into this chilling story, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I cover important true crime cases and delve into the psychology of criminals. Mick Philpott was born in 1956 in Derby, England. Mick's childhood was far from ideal. He was one of 7 children in a family where his father regularly beat his mother. It was during this period that Mick began showing his first signs of cruelty, bullying animals and younger children at school. His school teachers later recalled that the boy had an extremely volatile temper and often got into fights over the slightest provocations. The Philpott family's neighbors remembered that young Mick often watched his parents' fights through a crack in the door, then recreated what he saw in games with his sisters, displaying unnatural aggression for a child. By his teenage years, he had already gained a reputation as a local troublemaker, and his first conviction for fighting came at the age of 16. After finishing school, Mick scraped by with odd jobs. He worked at a factory, as a loader, and later found employment as a baker. He never stayed anywhere longer than a few months. He was fired due to aggressive behavior and conflicts with colleagues. His last official job was at a bakery, from which he was fired in 2001 for fighting with his supervisor. After this, he decided it was easier to live on social benefits. Mick began his first serious relationship with Kim Hill. At the time they met, she was 15, and Mick was 4 years older. For young Kim, this was her first love, and she sincerely believed in the longevity of their relationship. However, reality proved quite different. It started with excessive control from Mick, which eventually evolved into unmotivated aggression. The first instance of physical violence came as a complete surprise to Kim. She couldn't even understand the reason. Mick initially restrained himself, fearing Kim's father's reaction, but gradually lost any moral constraints. The violence occurred both at home and in public. A notable incident occurred in a bar when Mick hit Kim in the face with a pool cue in front of other patrons, then forced her to sit silently in a corner. Kim's attempts to end these toxic relationships met with violent resistance. When she declared her intention to leave, Mick broke her arm and threatened her with a hammer if she tried again. According to Kim's school friends, the beatings occurred almost daily. Mick meticulously checked her notebooks to find suspicious notes from other boys. Every morning, he waited outside the school, monitoring who she talked to. A particularly cruel punishment for Kim was having her hair cut. Mick would personally cut off her long locks if he thought she was paying too much attention to her appearance. The girl started wearing long sleeves even in summer, avoided school parties, and gradually lost all her friends. Fearing for her father's safety, who would undoubtedly have come to her defense, Kim concealed the true cause of her bruises, explaining them away as accidental injuries or school incidents. In the summer of 1978, after 2 years of suffering, Kim took a decisive step. She sent Mick a farewell letter, informing him about ending their relationship and moving back to her parents. Enraged by such an insult, Mick waited until Kim's father left for the night shift, broke into her bedroom, and inflicted 27 stab wounds on her. Her mother, who ran to her daughter's screams, also became a victim of the attack, receiving 11 stab wounds. Miraculously, both women survived and managed to escape from the house. Their screams attracted the attention of neighbors who called the police. Law enforcement found Mick on the porch with a bloody. For attempted murder, he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, of which he served only 3 years, being released early for good behavior. During his imprisonment, Mick wrote letters to Kim with apologies and promises to marry her after his release. In prison, Mick quickly found common ground with other inmates, demonstrating remarkable manipulative skills. He became known among the guards for his demonstrative religiosity and repentance, visited the prison chaplain, and even organized a Bible study group. The prison psychologist noted in his report that behind this mask lay deeply rooted violence and a lack of genuine remorse. Of particular concern was his ability to quickly change behavior depending on the situation, from demonstrative religiosity to cold calculation. However, his first wife was Pamela Lomax. His first children were born in this marriage, but Mick's character hadn't changed. Now Pamela became the victim of violence. Knowing about the fate of Mick's previous girlfriend, she didn't dare to go to the police or file for divorce. Release came unexpectedly for Pamela. 37-year-old Mick began dating 14-year-old Heather Kehoe. When she turned 16, she ran away with him from her parents' home, already expecting twins from him. However, Heather quickly realized her mistake after Mick beat her because she was carrying boys, not girls. She fled from him, initially leaving the children behind, but later managed to get them back with the help of social services. In 2000, fate brought Mick together with 19-year-old Mairead Duffy, a single mother who had recently divorced due to domestic violence. She managed to find common ground with Mick, and they began living together. A year later, 16-year-old orphan Lisa Willis, also a single mother, appeared in Mick's life. Mairead knew about this relationship and was comfortable with it. In 2002, Lisa and her child joined their household, and the following year, Mick married Mairead, with Lisa serving as a bridesmaid at the wedding. By 2005, the unusual family, consisting of Mick, Mairead, Lisa, and 9 children, was living in a 3-bedroom council house. Mick led quite a carefree life. Both women worked, all money was kept in his bank account, and state benefits for the children provided additional income. Life in their home had a clear hierarchy. Mick occupied the position of undisputed leader, controlling every aspect of family life. He established a system of punishments not only for children but also for adult family members. Mairead and Lisa had to account for every penny spent, and the children were afraid to even laugh loudly for fear of angering their father. Neighbors often heard loud arguments and screams from their apartment, but no one dared to intervene. Mick skillfully created the image of a caring father in public. He took children to school, participated in parent meetings, and even organized street parties for neighborhood children. However, at home, he established strict rules. Children had to maintain complete silence when he watched television, and any disobedience was physically punished. When Mairead and Lisa became pregnant again, Mick tried to obtain a larger house from the state. After being denied due to the lack of suitable council housing, he began regularly appearing on British television. His unusual family attracted significant interest from journalists, and Mick quickly gained local popularity. In his television appearances, he constantly emphasized the insufficient state support for his family, but these attempts to draw public attention and influence the government had the opposite effect. Television fame quickly went to Mick's head. He began demanding money for interviews and threatened journalists with lawsuits if they wrote negatively about him. Once, he even tried to sell exclusive rights to his family's story to the News of the World tabloid for £50,000, but the deal fell through due to his excessive demands. Local journalists recalled that he constantly called them with sensational news about himself, trying to maintain press interest. Local tabloids dubbed him the Derby Barber, due to his characteristic hairstyle, which he hadn't changed since the 1980s, long hair tied in a ponytail. Instead of the expected public sympathy, Mick faced sharp criticism from society. People couldn't understand how a grown man, instead of working and providing for his family independently, was going around television channels begging for help from the state. Due to this behavior, he even earned the eloquent nickname, Shameless Mick, from the public. The situation became complicated when Lisa began to show character. Over time, she changed. She was no longer the 16-year-old girl who could be easily manipulated. Having experienced life in an orphanage, she was used to relying only on herself, which formed an independent character strikingly different from the submissive Mairead. In 2012, Lisa took an unprecedented step since 1978, taking advantage of Mick's absence. She gathered her belongings, the savings available in the house, and, taking the children, left him. Mick hadn't felt such betrayal since Kim Hill's escape, which had caused her 27 stab wounds. This time, the only way of revenge available to him was fighting for custody of the children. Despite all his negative qualities, Mick did have an attachment to his children. At that time, 6 of his and Mairead's shared children remained with them. Gaining custody of Lisa's children would mean increased state benefits, allowing him to continue living without working. Financial investigations showed that over the last 5 years, Mick had received more than £100,000 from the state in various social benefits. Meanwhile, he regularly participated in illegal gambling, spending money meant for the children. Messages to bookmakers and debt collectors were found on his phone. Some debts he paid off by forcing Mairead and Lisa to take out loans in their names. The women worked as cleaners on night shifts, and Mick took all their earnings, giving them only a few pounds for transportation. Lisa's escape was carefully planned. For months, she secretly set aside small amounts from her salary, hiding them in a shoebox at work. She had prearranged a small apartment in another city and organized the transfer of children to a new school. On the day of escape, she was helped by a work colleague who distracted Mick with a fake job interview call. Ironically, this caution and planning saved Lisa from arson suspicions. The police had all the documents confirming her whereabouts on the night of the tragedy. A lengthy custody battle began. Lisa, hardened by years of living with Mick, wasn't going to give up. But the day before the decisive court hearing, a horrible tragedy occurred. On May 11, 2012, a fire broke out in Mick's house. 5 children, Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, and Jaden, died on the spot. Their half-brother Duane, Mairead's firstborn, died later in the hospital. Doctors fought for Duane's life for 3 days. The boy had burns on 90% of his body but remained conscious until the end and tried to tell the police about the events of that night. According to nurses, he kept repeating, "Dad knew. Dad knew." When his heart stopped, only his grandmother, Mairead's mother, was in the ward, who later testified against her daughter and Mick in court. The cause of death was smoke inhalation and multiple burns. Only Mick and Mairead managed to survive. According to firefighters' conclusions, the temperature in the children's room reached 500 degrees, making any chance of rescue impossible. The investigation showed that the fire started from the front door, where an unknown person poured petrol through the mail slot. Police thoroughly questioned Lisa, her sister, and her sister's husband, but their non-involvement was proven. During the investigation, shocking details emerged about how Mick prepared his alibi. A week before the fire, he forced Mairead to buy new mobile phones and SIM cards. On the night of the tragedy, he called his mother and several friends, telling them about threats from unknown persons. Later, investigators found search history on his computer about how to start a fire and cover tracks. Particularly striking was the fact that the day before the tragedy, he took down and hid all family photographs in the garage. The fire that claimed 6 children's lives became a turning point for the entire Derby community. Local residents, who had previously silently observed the unusual family's life, now openly spoke about the warning signs they had noticed for years. School teachers remembered how the children often came to class tired and hungry but were afraid to talk about their home life. Mick's older children from previous relationships, learning about the tragedy, publicly spoke about their childhood for the first time. 25-year-old Michael, Pamela Lomax's son, recalled how his father forced them to wake up at 5 a.m. to clean the house, even on weekends. 18-year-old Catherine, Heather Kehoe's daughter, told about constant beatings and psychological abuse. She showed journalists a diary she kept at 13, describing how her father would lock them in the basement for the slightest offense. The children organized a fundraiser for a memorial to their deceased brothers and sisters, categorically refusing any contact with their father. The true scale of the tragedy was revealed during the children's autopsies. Pathologists found that the children had tried to save themselves. Their fingers had characteristic scratches from attempting to open windows. Police officers who first arrived at the fire scene were shocked by Mick's behavior. Instead of despair, he showed unnatural calmness and was more concerned about his mobile phone left in the house. The investigation was led by Senior Inspector Paul Callum, who immediately created a special team of 40 detectives. Police conducted door-to-door interviews with all district residents, collecting over 300 testimonies. Special attention was paid to surveillance cameras. More than 400 hours of footage from adjacent streets were analyzed. Forensic experts spent 28 days in the burned house collecting evidence. They used then cutting-edge 3D scanning technology to recreate an accurate picture of the fire's spread. Detectives also discovered that a week before the fire, Mick had bought 5 canisters of petrol at different gas stations, paying in cash. The installation of listening devices in the hotel room where Mick and Mairead were temporarily staying revealed the horrifying truth. It turned out that the fire was part of an elaborate plan. Mick, along with his friend Paul and wife Mairead, had planned to stage an arson attack during which Mick would heroically save the family. They had even prepared ladders by the windows for evacuation. The plan involved blaming Lisa for the arson, which would deprive her of any chance of custody over the children. Mick expected to gain not only public recognition for saving the family but also custody of Lisa's children, increased social benefits, and a new spacious house to replace the burned one. However, the plan went wrong. The fire spread too quickly, engulfing the ladder to the second floor and cutting off the children's escape route. Although Mick and Mairead tried to display public grief for their deceased children, their guilt was proven. During the search of the hotel room, police found Mairead's notebook where she detailed her feelings for Mick. The entries revealed deep emotional dependency. "Without him, I'm nobody. He's the only one who truly understands me and the children." Psychologists who later analyzed these entries noted classic signs of Stockholm Syndrome. In prison, Mairead underwent intensive psychotherapy that helped her realize the true nature of her relationship with Mick. Particularly revealing was the moment when she was shown children's drawings found in the burned house. They depicted their father as a large black monster. Throughout the trial, Mick showed a complete lack of remorse. He joked with guards, winked at journalists, and even tried to flirt with female jurors. When the prosecutor showed photographs of the deceased children, Mick yawned and turned away. His behavior so outraged the judge that he specifically noted it in the verdict as a demonstration of extreme narcissism and complete lack of empathy. The court found that the couple had no intention of killing the children, so all participants were convicted of manslaughter of 6 people. On April 2, 2013, the court handed down its sentence. Mick Philpott and Paul received 17 years each with the possibility of early release after 8.5 years, while Mick was sentenced to life imprisonment. In prison, Mick continued to cause problems. He wrote several appeals, blaming Lisa and the police for everything. Guards regularly found prohibited mobile phones in his cell, through which he tried to contact the press. In 2021, he made news when it was revealed that due to good behavior, he had been transferred to a lower security prison, which caused public outrage and petitions to review this decision. In prison, Mairead realized the full tragedy of her mistake. "If I hadn't met him, I would be free now, and most importantly, my children would be alive." The price she paid for understanding Mick Philpott's true nature proved immeasurably high. Fortunately, his other women managed to recognize the danger in time and leave the person who systematically destroyed the lives of everyone around him. The epilogue of Mick Philpott's case became a symbol of a systemic problem in British society. His story provoked serious debates about the effectiveness of social services and child protection systems. In 2014, a memorial to the deceased children was opened in Derby, and local authorities implemented new protocols for responding to domestic violence cases. However, for many local residents, this tragedy will forever remain a painful reminder of how collective silence can lead to irreparable consequences. Lisa managed to build a new life in another city. She completed accounting courses and found work at a local company. Her children successfully adapted to their new school, although they needed psychological help for a long time. In 2015, she married her children's school teacher who had helped them overcome their trauma. Lisa founded an online support group for women fleeing violence with children, where she shares practical advice about planning escapes and starting new lives. In 2020, she published a book under a pseudonym, detailing her experience of living with Mick and the recovery process after escaping. 10 years later, in 2022, BBC journalists made a documentary about this case. Kim Hill, who had been living under a different name in Scotland all these years, spoke publicly for the first time. She revealed that after Mick's attack, she never again wore short sleeves due to the scars from stab wounds. Kim created a charitable foundation to help domestic violence victims and personally counsels women trying to escape toxic relationships. "The scariest thing," she said in an interview, "is that I see Mick's eyes in the stories of each of these women. The same control, the same violence, the same excuses." The case of Mick Philpott became a textbook example of how society sometimes reacts too late to obvious signs of dangerous behavior. Today, his story is studied in law faculties of British universities as an example of how timely intervention by social services could have prevented tragedy. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think about this case. And if you enjoy deep dives into true crime, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, friends.